Picture this. The power's been out for 3 days. The wind is screaming against the windows. Your furnace is a cold metal box in the basement. Your phone's at 4%. And the temperature inside your house has dropped to 41 degrees. Now picture a house half a mile down the road, no electric line running to it, no propane truck coming, no furnace at all, and inside, a family is sitting in their shirt sleeves. Warm, calm, comfortable. That's not a story. That's an Amish farmhouse in January. And the difference between those two houses has almost nothing to do with money and everything to do with knowledge that used to be common in this country and got quietly buried. I'm going to hand you that knowledge today. The same method I watched work in a house outside Holmes County, Ohio, when it was 9 degrees outside and the family hadn't paid a heating bill in their entire lives. And near the end, I'm going to show you something I found in a book published in 1914, a technique for staying warm through the coldest night of the year that costs almost nothing, that you can set up this weekend in the house you already own. No new furnace, no contractor. Most folks have never heard of it, so stay with me. The first time I sat in one of those homes, I made a fool of myself. It was bitter cold outside, and I walked in, and I actually started looking around for the heat register, running my hand along the wall, looking for the vent, looking for the thermostat. There wasn't one. And I remember standing there thinking, that's impossible, because I was warm. My glasses had even fogged up when I came in from the cold. The whole house held a steady, even warmth, the kind you feel in your bones, not the kind that blasts your face and leaves your feet freezing. I'd spent my whole adult life believing that warmth came out of a machine. You set a number, the machine burns fuel, the fan blows, and when the machine stops, the cold comes back in within the hour. That's the only kind of heat most of us have ever known. But that house was working on a completely different principle. And once I understood it, I couldn't unsee it. I started looking at my own home, the home I'd paid for, and I realized it was designed to fail the moment the power went out. Designed to depend on a constant feed of fuel and electricity every minute, forever. Here's the thing, nobody told you. Your house doesn't actually keep you warm. It just slows down how fast you lose heat. That's all insulation is. A speed bump for heat leaving the building, and modern homes are built like a paper cup. The second you stop pouring hot coffee in the top, the heat drains out the bottom. They burn fuel fast, they lose it fast, and they only feel warm as long as the machine keeps running. The Amish build the opposite way. They build a house that catches heat and holds on to it. So when the heat source goes quiet for the night, the warmth is still there and they're ran the morning. Let me show you how they do it. Because every piece of this you can copy. The whole secret comes down to 2 words. Thermal mass. I know that sounds technical. It isn't. Thermal mass just means heavy stuff that soaks up heat slowly and gives it back slowly. Stone, brick, clay, tile, a big tank of water. Think about a cast iron skillet. You heat it up and it stays hot long after you take it off the flame. Now think about a thin aluminum pan. It heats fast and goes cold the second you pull it off the burner. Your modern house is the aluminum pan. The Amish house is the cast iron skillet. Now here's where the history gets interesting and where you start to see how much we forgot. The people who became the Amish and the Mennonites came out of Germany and Switzerland mostly in the 1700s. And they brought a piece of technology with them that was already centuries old over there. In German, it's called a Kachelofen, a masonry stove. Out in Pennsylvania, the old-timers called it the German stove, or the 5-plate stove. This thing is nothing like the wood stove you're picturing. A regular wood stove is a steel box. It gets blazing hot while the fire is burning, roasts you if you stand near it, then goes stone cold a couple hours after the fire dies. A masonry stove is the exact opposite. It's a massive structure, sometimes a ton or two of brick and stone and clay. You build a hot, fast fire inside it, not a slow smolder. A roaring fire for maybe an hour or two. The fire burns out completely. And then that enormous mass of masonry slowly radiates the stored heat back into the house for the next 12, 18, even 24 hours. One fire in the morning. That's it. And the house stays warm all day and through the night on the heat held inside the brick. Now I want you to hear that number again because it matters. 1 or 2 fires a day. Penn State and other agricultural researchers who've studied masonry heaters found they can hit efficiencies far above an old open fireplace. An open fireplace, the romantic kind everybody loves, is actually one of the worst ways to heat a house ever invented. It sends most of your heat straight up the chimney and actually sucks warm air out of the room behind you. You feel hot in the face and the rest of the house gets colder. The masonry stove captures that heat instead of letting it fly up the flue. The smoke winds through channels inside the brick, dumping its warmth into the mass before it ever reaches the sky. So why don't we all have one? That's the question I started asking, and the answer is the part that made me angry, because somebody benefited from you not knowing this. Think about who makes money when your house is built like a paper cup. The folks who sell you fuel every single month, the company that bills you for electricity and gas, on for as long as you own the home. A house that holds its own heat is a house that needs less of what they're selling. A masonry stove is a one-time build that runs on wood you could cut yourself. There's no monthly bill in that. There's no meter on the side of the house. And there's nobody to send you a statement. Back in the early and middle 1900s, as gas and electric heating got pushed into every American home, the message was simple. The old ways are dirty, the old ways are backward. Modern means a furnace and a thermostat. Throw out the heavy stove, tear out the brick, trust the machine, and we did. We tore the thermal mass right out of our houses and replaced it with thin walls and a fan, and we signed up for a bill that never ends. We traded a house that worked on its own for a house that only works as long as you keep paying. The Amish never made that trade. I sat with an older man near Mount Hope, Ohio. He had to be close to 80, and I asked him what his family did when a blizzard knocked everything out for a week. He just kind of tilted his head at me like I'd asked him what he does when the sun goes down. He said, "Nothing. We do nothing different. The storm doesn't change anything in here." And that sentence stuck with me. The storm doesn't change anything in here. If what I'm sharing here is hitting home for you, I want to point you toward something I put together specifically for people who want to go deeper than a single video. It's called the Amish Pantry Blueprint, and it's part of a full field edition I've built out called the Complete Amish Resilience Field Edition. Everything I've been digging up, the heating methods, the food storage, the old root cellar designs, the self-reliant systems, these communities have been quietly running for generations. It's all documented in one place, organized so you can actually use it. You can find it linked in the description below for $97, and it's the closest thing I know to sitting down with someone who still lives this way and having them hand you the whole playbook. If you're serious about not needing the grid to survive the winter, that's where to go next. But let's get back to what you can do right now in the house you already own. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. Here is the thing the Amish understand that we forgot. You do not have to heat the whole house. We got the idea somewhere in the last 70 years that the right way to live is to keep every room in the building at 72 degrees day and night, whether anybody's standing in that room or not. We heat empty hallways, we heat closets, we heat bedrooms nobody walks into until bedtime. That's a brand new idea in human history. And it's an expensive one. The old way, the Amish way, the way your own great-grandparents lived, was to heat the people and heat one room. The Germans even had a name for it, the Stube. The warm room, the heart of the house. One room kept genuinely warm, where the family gathered, ate, worked, and lived through the cold months. The rest of the house was allowed to be cold, and nobody thought a thing about it. You can do this today in your existing home this week with no permits and nobody's permission. Pick one room, the smallest one your family can comfortably gather in, a room with a door you can close, ideally on the south side of the house where the winter sun comes in. That becomes your warm room. You close it off from the rest of the house. You hang a heavy blanket or a quilt over the doorway if there's no door, and you concentrate every bit of heat you have into that one space. A small space with one heat source will get warm and stay warm. The same heat spread across 2,000 square feet does almost nothing. Now let's make that room hold heat like a masonry stove, even though it's an ordinary room. Here's a trick I learned that costs you next to nothing. Water. Water is one of the best, cheapest forms of thermal mass on Earth. You take some large containers, jugs, drums, anything that seals, you fill them with water, and you put them in your warm room, especially anywhere the sun hits them during the day. That water soaks up heat all day from your stove or even from the sun through the window, and it releases that heat back into the room slowly all night long. A bunch of water containers in a small room is a poor man's masonry stove. It evens out the temperature. The room stops swinging from hot to cold. It just stays warm. That alone in a power outage can be the difference between a room at 40 degrees and a room at 60. And here's the next piece, the one almost everybody overlooks because we ripped it out of our houses and called it old-fashioned, the windows. Go look at a real old Pennsylvania farmhouse, the kind built in the 1800s. Look close at the windows. A lot of them have interior shutters, solid wood panels, folded back into the wall during the day, that close over the window from the inside at night. People today think those were for privacy or for keeping out intruders. They weren't. They were insulation. At night, in winter, you close those wooden shutters and you cut a huge amount of heat loss because glass is a sieve. A single pane of glass loses heat about 10 times faster than the wall around it. Your windows are the holes in your bucket. So here's what you do. Tonight, in the house, you make window quilts, or you buy them, or you cut rigid foam board to fit snug inside each window frame. At sundown, you cover your windows from the inside, thick fabric, foam, even rolled blankets pinned over the glass. In the morning, on the sunny side, you open them up and let the sun pour in to warm your water jugs. At night, you seal them back up. This is not high technology. This is what your ancestors did every single winter night of their lives, as automatically as locking the front door. And it can raise the temperature of a closed room by several degrees with zero fuel. You see what's happening here? Every one of these tricks does the same thing. It turns your leaky paper cup back into a cast iron skillet. It makes the household heat instead of bleeding it. But there's one more layer. And this is the layer that, in a real emergency, when everything has gone wrong and the heat is barely there at all, is what actually keeps a human being alive through the night. And it's the part I almost can't believe we forgot. Because it's the simplest of all. Let me take you back to that book I mentioned. 1814, the Pennsylvania Germans were already old hands at winter, but the man who wrote it all down was named Henry Chapman Mercer. He was a collector and an archaeologist in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and in 1914 he published a book called The Bible in Iron. In it, he documented those old German stoveplates and the whole world of Pennsylvania German heating that was already disappearing even then. He could see over 100 years ago that this knowledge was vanishing. He wrote it down so it wouldn't be lost. And buried inside that whole tradition is a sleeping arrangement that modern people have completely forgotten, and that will keep you warm in a house with almost no heat at all. Here it is, 2 parts. Simple enough to set up before you go to bed tonight. Part 1, you do not just sleep under a thick cover, you sleep on top of one too. Now think about that, because almost nobody does it right. When you lie down in a cold room, where do you actually lose your heat? Most people think it goes up into the air, but a huge amount of your body heat gets pulled down into the mattress through conduction. The cold mass underneath you drinks the warmth right out of your body all night long. You can pile 6 blankets on top and still shiver because the cold is coming up from below. The Germans slept between 2 feather beds, one beneath, one above. They called the bottom one the underbed. You sink down into a thick layer of down underneath you, and that down stops your heat from draining into the cold bed frame. Then the cover on top traps the warmth your body makes. You become a warm thing sealed inside an insulated pocket, top and bottom. So tonight, take a comforter, a sleeping bag, a thick folded blanket, anything with loft, and put it underneath you, between your body and the mattress. Then cover up on top as usual. That one change, insulating below you, not just above, can be the difference between a freezing night and a comfortable one. And almost no one alive today knows to do it. Now part 2, the part that ties it all together. You bring thermal mass right into the bed with you. For hundreds of years, all across the cold parts of Europe and early America, people heated a stone or a brick by the fire in the evening. Soapstone was prized for it because soapstone holds heat longer than almost any common stone. They'd warm it, wrap it in thick wool or flannel so it couldn't burn anyone, and tuck it down at the foot of the bed under the covers an hour before they turned in. By the time they climbed in, the bed was already warm. And that wrapped stone gave off gentle heat for hours, right where you need it most, at your feet. Because cold feet are what actually keep you awake and steal your core warmth. A warm stone at your feet, a feather bed beneath you, a thick cover on top, all inside one small closed room with jugs of water holding the day's heat and the windows sealed against the dark. In a setup like that, you can sleep soundly through a night when the air in the rest of the house is below freezing. You do not need the furnace. You do not need the grid. You need a stone, some wool, and the knowledge they tried to make you forget. And here's the piece that brings the whole thing home, the part that made me sit up when I found it in the old records. The most efficient version of this wasn't even a separate bed. In a lot of these old German and Alpine houses, the bed was built right up against the back of that masonry stove, sometimes a sleeping shelf built directly onto the warm brick. The stove that you fired once in the evening became the headboard you slept against, radiating gentle warmth into your bedding all night long. They had figured out 300 years ago how to make a single fire keep a person warm until sunrise without ever burning through the night. That is not primitive. That is genius. That is engineering we were taught to look down on. And the reason we look down on it is the part I want you to really hear before you go. There was nothing accidental about how this knowledge disappeared. In the middle of the last century, whole industries were built on the idea that you would pay every month forever to stay warm, that you would never own your heat, that you would always rent it from somebody else, one bill at a time. The companies selling that arrangement spent a fortune teaching Americans that the old self-reliant ways were shameful and dirty and beneath a modern family. They didn't just sell furnaces. They sold contempt for everything that came before the furnace. And it worked. 2 or 3 generations later, here we are. A nation of people who genuinely believe that when the power goes out, there's nothing to do but sit in the cold and wait and hope and freeze and call somebody. The Amish heard that same sales pitch, the same one. For 100 years now, somebody's been knocking on those doors offering to hook them up, wire them in, sign them on. And they looked at the deal where you pay forever and you own nothing and you can't survive a single storm without them. And they said, no, thank you. We'll keep the stone. We'll keep the brick. We'll keep the feather bed and the warm room and the shutters. And every January, when the ice storms come and the lines go down and half the county is shivering in the dark calling a number that doesn't answer, those families sit in their shirt sleeves, warm, calm, doing nothing different. The storm doesn't change anything in here. You can have that. Not someday in a house you can't afford to build, this weekend. In the house you already own. You can pick your warm room. You can fill your water jugs. You can cut foam for your windows and put a blanket under you instead of just on top, and warm a stone by whatever heat you've got and carry it to bed wrapped in an old wool sweater. None of it requires money you don't have. None of it requires permission. It requires only that you remember what your own great-grandparents knew in their bones before somebody convinced your family to forget it on purpose. What you just got back is something that was taken from you, not lost, taken. The simple, ancient, stubborn ability to keep your own family warm with your own 2 hands no matter what goes wrong out there. That's the thing they never wanted you to feel. That you don't actually need them. If you're the kind of person who believes real knowledge like this got pushed aside to protect somebody else's monthly bill, then you already know what to do next. You hold on to it, you pass it on, you make sure it doesn't disappear the way Henry Mercer was afraid it would back in 1914 when he wrote it all down so it would survive. Now, I want to hear from you. Of everything I showed you today, which one are you actually going to set up first? The warm room, the water jugs for thermal mass, the shutters over the windows, or the old feather bed trick, sleeping on top of the loft instead of just under it? Tell me in the comments. Just type the one you're starting with. I read them and I answer, and other folks watching need to know what their neighbors are choosing. And if you want the rest of what I've been digging up, stay close. Because next I'm going to show you how the Amish keep food from spoiling all winter and deep into summer without a refrigerator, without electricity, without a single moving part. There's a specific design in the ground, an old root cellar method from the Pennsylvania Dutch that holds a steady temperature year-round, and almost nobody builds it right anymore. I found the original dimensions in an old farmer's bulletin, and once you see them, you'll never look at your basement the same way again. This isn't just a channel, it's a few of us quietly digging up what got buried and refusing to let it stay that way. So keep your stone warm, keep your room small, and don't ever let anyone tell you that you need their machine to survive the night. You don't. You never did. I'll see you in the next one. Before you go, let me give you one more thing, because you earned it by staying this long. There's a detail about that warm room that I left out, and it's the difference between a room that's merely tolerable and a room that's genuinely cozy. It's the ceiling. Heat rises. You know that. But in an old farmhouse with 10-foot ceilings, all your precious warmth collects up where nobody's sitting 6 feet above your head, doing you no good at all. The Amish handle this without a fan, without electricity, with one simple move. They lower the ceiling in the dead of winter. They tack up fabric, an old sheet, a length of cloth, even a quilt across the room, a foot or two below the real ceiling. It traps the rising heat in a pocket down at human level, where your body actually is. It's like putting a lid on a pot. The same fire, the same stove, suddenly heats a room that feels twice as warm because you stopped wasting it on the empty air overhead. Try it tonight. Hang a sheet a foot under your ceiling in your warm room. You'll feel the difference within the hour, and you'll wonder, like I did, how we ever forgot something this simple.